Kosking, Heather Duplessis-Allen, Simon Barnett, James Daniels. All the names you can trust. This is News Talk ZB News.
It's 4 o'clock. I'm Bruce Russell. The Ministry of Health is reporting 19 COVID-related deaths today, including 2 children aged under 9 years. Those deaths happened over the past 7 days. The other deaths are those of 1 person in their 20s, 4 in their 60s, 2 in their 70s, 5 in their 80s and 5 people aged over 90. There are 7,930 new cases of COVID-19 in the community today. The Shelley Bay situation may be getting closer to coming to an end. Protesters and a local iwi trust have laid a Māori stone at the site this morning as a symbol of unity. Mo Whenua have been occupying the site in Wellington since November 2020 in opposition to a $500 million development. Taranaki Whanui Settlement Trust Chairman Kara Pukatapu Dentis says he understands there's going to be a change in tactics.
My understanding is that they are changing the focus of their protest to the legal challenge instead of being on the land.
An environment expert wants more specifics from the government's plan to tackle our biodiversity crisis. 4,000 species face threats like climate change and pests, but the plan hopes to stop these issues through providing a coherent strategy to protect our native plants and animals. Environmental consultant Dr. Andrea Byram says there's still more work to do.
I think this plan is a good start. What I would like to see is a lot more concrete clarity, I suppose, around the actions that actually will be taken on the ground.
A trainer and her horse have been banned from racing after methamphetamine was found in their systems after a successful race. Open Justice reports Rochelle Lockett has been handed a 3-year disqualification from the Racing Integrity Board. The test came after B Flexi won its race at the Otaki Māori Racing Club meet back in January this year. The horse was swabbed after the win and showed meth in its system. Lockett's test later came back positive for the drug as well. The 50-year-old offered no explanation as to how meth got into her horse's system, but eventually admitted she had used it on her birthday 2 days prior to the meet. The board said if Lockett can stay off the drug for 18 months, she might be allowed to saddle up again. Concern: people in the digital dark have been left more vulnerable throughout the pandemic. An economist says there's very little data on how many of us are digitally excluded, but it's estimated to be between 10 and 20%. New Zealand Institute of Economic Research's Olivia Wills says a big danger is people with internet access but few digital skills. She says COVID-19 created a lot of uncertainty and there's information coming at people all the time.
It's really important that we're not just focusing on making sure people have access to the internet, but actually can discern between what information comes from a reliable source and what doesn't.
US film and stage actor Robert Morse, a 2-time Tony Award winner, also known for TV's Mad Men, has died at age 90. His career in pictures, particularly in comedy roles, began in the 50s and flourished in the 60s and 70s. He hit the big time at age 30 as the star of the smash 1961 Broadway satire of corporate life, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. On stage, he earned 5 Tony Award nominations. Robert Morse played the part of Bertram Cooper on TV's Mad Men. He died after an illness.
Get your news and views on the go with News Talk ZB's podcasts on iHeartRadio. This is News Talk ZB News.
It's 12 o'clock. I'm Bruce Russell. A horror weekend so far on the roads has claimed 9 lives since Friday afternoon. It began then with the deaths of 4 teenage boys in Invercargill shortly before 4 o'clock. This from Shannon Johnstone.
Police have now named the 4 victims. They were Connor Steele, Indica Rouse, Kaya Kennedy and O Maruhuato Tawhai. 4 people died in separate crashes on Saturday. They were in Levin, Whangarei, Awakere near Whakatane and Raglan. A 9th person died shortly before 1 a.m. today in Herekino, south of Kaitaia.
State Highway 4 has been closed near Kopaki and Waikato following a serious crash there involving a motorbike and another vehicle. State Highway 4 is closed near Ratahi in the central North Island following a serious crash involving a motorbike and another vehicle around 1 o'clock this morning. Diversions are in place. The government's opened the trade door, but it's up to businesses to go through it. That was Jacinda Ardern's message as she wrapped up her week-long tour of Singapore and Japan. The Prime Minister says negotiating agreements like the Trans-Pacific Partnership means businesses have the opportunity to explore new markets.
But it's not a given that you maximise that unless you have your exporters in the market and those strong relationships and the kind of work that our trade people do on the ground.
Results of the French election will come out overnight. Current President Emmanuel Macron faces far-right opponent Marine Le Pen. Political analyst Alex Kushner says while it's the same two people running, it's a different scenario from that of 5 years ago.
Now Emmanuel Macron has a record. He's the sitting president. So he has to own to his own record. And Marine Le Pen has to put behind her very bad 2017 campaign.
A chance to catch up with other countries on ensuring an ethical supply chain. Aid organisation Tear Fund is applauding the move toward legislation which would force big companies to take action if their products involve slavery or forced labour. Research shows more than $3.1 billion worth of products potentially made with slave labour were imported to New Zealand in 2019. Chief Executive Ian McInnes says we'll be following in the footsteps of others.
A number of countries have this act already, particularly in the UK, a number of EU countries. Canada has it proposed, Australia has an act.
Social media platform TikTok is leading to a resurgence in reading. The video sharing platform is seeing a jump in sales for booksellers in this country and overseas, especially for books reviewed on the site. As Shet NZ marketing manager Sasha Begley says certain genre are popping off more than others.
What's been really interesting with TikTok is that the books that are selling, they tend to be romance and YA fantasy.
Local celebrities will be getting their boogie on as Dancing with the Stars returns to our screens. The 9th season of the show will kick off on Channel 3 at 7 this evening. Among the contestants is Newstalk ZB's Kerry Woodham, competing for the Mirrorball Trophy. She says the training has been intense.
We were doing probably 4 to 5 hours a day in high heels, trying to look glamorous.
She's back. Heather Duplessis-Allen, back Tuesday at 4 p.m. This is News Talk ZB News.
It's 1 o'clock. I'm Bruce Russell. Police believe 2 firearms incidents in Wellington yesterday morning were gang-related. The incidents were in Dixon Street in the central city and Tremuen Street at Tawa. 7 people were arrested and police are working to bring formal charges against them. 2 people remain in critical condition in Wellington Hospital. Police say they're not ruling out making further arrests. Meanwhile, police reports have revealed concerns the system is stretched, dealing with criminal 501 deportees. Between 2015 and February this year, there were more than 2,500 of them from Australia, nearly half reoffended here. Police Minister Poto Williams says there's been more funding for the social services organisation that covers reintegration and around 1,400 more police. National Party Police spokesman Mark Mitchell says the government has not been proactive in managing the deportees.
This isn't going to change until the government gets really serious about it and actually starts taking some proactive steps towards getting on top of these gangs.
Japan's Coast Guard is searching for a tour boat with 26 people on board, including 2 children. It's been more than 9 hours since it sent word it was sinking off the northern island of Hokkaido. Crew have reported that passengers were wearing life jackets. Just in from the Ministry of Health, we have 5,662 COVID-19 community cases and 9 deaths. There are 490 in hospital, 20 in intensive care. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Secretary of Defence Lloyd Austin are travelling to Kiev to hold talks with Ukraine's President Zelensky. Meanwhile, Russia's top state investigative body says it's looking into a report alleging that sabotage experts from the UK's SAS forces have been deployed to western Ukraine. The British Ministry of Defence says it does not comment on Special Forces activities. If the government wants to ease pressure on the supply chain, it's going to have to front up with the cash. That's from a sector expert following the release of a paper from the Transport Ministry into supply chain challenges for public consultation. It warns climate change will impact production and population growth will put pressure on freight. Auckland University's Tava Olsen says if the government wants to improve resilience or switch to low emissions freight, it will have to invest.
But you can't expect commercial enterprises to just magically decide to invest the money in something that's for the good of the country.
Anti-slavery legislation is being welcomed by an aid organisation. The new law would force big companies to investigate concerns that their products involve forced labour. More than $3.1 billion worth of products, potentially made with slave labour, made their way into New Zealand in 2019. Tier Fund Chief Executive Ian McInnes says people are keen to see the bill pass.
So I believe there is an appetite for that, and New Zealand consumers would sleep a lot better at night knowing there isn't slavery in the common good.
A confidence younger generations are being taught about Anzac Day. This year marks 100 years since the first poppy appeal in this country, held on the 24th of April 1922. War historian Stephen Clark says the way people are taught and learn about the day has changed slightly.
There's so much content now in terms of documentaries and films on television and other media that you can certainly pick up an understanding.
News you can trust. This is News Talk ZB News.
It's 2 o'clock. I'm Bruce Russell. The Ministry of Health says there are 9 COVID-19 related deaths today, including people who have died with the virus in the past 9 days. 1 person in their 50s, 1 in their 60s, 1 in their 70s, 1 in their 80s, 5 over the age of 90. They were from the Auckland, Waikato, Bay of Plenty, Lakes, Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury regions. Today there are 5,662 new COVID-19 community cases, with 490 people in hospital and 20 in intensive care. The Cook Islands has changed COVID-19 restrictions as its case numbers decrease. They've had 4,609 cases, 636 active cases. From the 1st of May, travel to Aitutaki will be unrestricted, meaning no one travelling there will need a pre-departure test. And pre-departure testing for Rarotonga will also be removed. Prime Minister Mark Brown says it's time to start relaxing the restrictions.
COVID is nothing for us to fear because we have protected ourselves.
A horror weekend on the road so far has claimed 9 lives since Friday afternoon. It began with the deaths of 4 teenage boys in Invercargill shortly before 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. They were Connor Steele, Indaka Rouse, Kaya Kennedy and Omaru Huatau Tawhai. 4 people died in separate crashes yesterday in Levin, Whangarei, Awakeri near Whakatane and in Raglan. Meanwhile, this morning, shortly before 1, a 9th person died at Herakino, south of Kaitaia. A piece of our World War I history will be on display in a small French town. Weta Workshop is working on a living memorial museum in Le Quesnoy to tell the story of the New Zealand-led liberation of the town from the Germans. It will begin operating from Anzac Day next year. New Zealand Memorial Museum Trust Le Quesnoy Chairman Sir Don McKinnon says it's important to have exhibitions like these.
People still like to look and feel and see and touch and smell and all those things that you cannot always get just looking at the phone in your hand.
A social media platform TikTok is helping younger people catch the reading bug. Books that are talked about on the site often see an uptick in sales here and overseas. Hachette New Zealand marketing manager Sasha Begley says it's driving an increase in younger people reading genre like romance and young adult fantasy. She says the publisher has taken advantage of the app's popularity.
What we've done at Hachette, which has been really great, is we've been running workshops with retailers around the country going through explaining what is TikTok and how best they can utilise TikTok in their stores.
Famous faces will be dancing on our screens tonight as Dancing with the Stars returns. Season 9 of the popular reality show will air on Channel 3 at 7. Among the dancers, News Talk ZB's Kerry Woodham. She says she'd been asked to appear in previous seasons and declined. She says she's looking forward to this.
It's a bit of fun after 2 years of dreariness, and it's just light and sparkle.
Every view, from every angle. This is News Talk ZB News.
It's 3 o'clock. I'm Bruce Russell. Our first known detection of the Omicron XE variant was reported yesterday. The COVID-19 subvariant has been spreading overseas and its arrival here is not unexpected. The ministry's reassuring us at this stage the public health settings already in place to manage other variants are appropriate for managing XE, and says no changes are required. XE is a combination of BA1 and BA2 subvariants of Omicron. There's some early evidence it may be slightly more transmissible than BA2, which is more transmissible than BA1. There's no evidence to date that XE causes more severe disease than other Omicron lineages. We'll hear overnight whether or not France has said oui to another term for sitting President Emmanuel Macron. The centrist faces far-right candidate Marine Le Pen in a rematch of the 2017 contest. It's thought there are millions of undecided voters and those who voted for candidates who failed to make it to the second round of polling. Political analyst Alex Kushner says traditionally dominant parties have been wiped out.
The Socialist Party, who has actually given us our last president before Emmanuel Macron, did 1.7%. That is dismal. And the Conservative Party are now under 6%.
4 of the 26 people from a tour boat missing in the frigid waters of northern Japan have been found, but their conditions are unknown. The 4 were spotted near the tip of Shiratoko Peninsula, although the Japanese Coast Guard was unable to confirm whether they were rescued alive. Public television says they were unconscious. The boat, carrying 24 passengers and 2 crew, went missing after sending a distress call, saying it had taken in water and was starting to sink. The rescue came after nearly 19 hours of intense searching involving 6 patrol boats, several aircraft and divers. Emergency services are responding to a serious crash on State Highway 36 at Nawaro in Bay of Plenty. The single vehicle crash was reported to police just before 2 this afternoon, and it's understood there are injuries. Our tech industry's biggest body says the sector has a long way to go when it comes to diversity. NZ Tech says it's been a focus since it noted low numbers of women, Māori and Pacific employees in the workforce in 2020. Chief Executive Graham Muller says greater diversity tends to lead to more money for companies. He says those aren't the only benefits, though.
As we start working on things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, we want the computers to be set up with the same sort of values that our country has.
A new phone app could be a key tool for research into our marine mammals. Little is currently known about many of our whales and dolphins. To assist in finding out more about them, an app's being developed where people can log their sightings of the animals. Researchers will then analyse data from the program for long-term studies. WWF-NZ Marine Species Program Manager Dr Krista van der Linde says it would be a big assistance.
If we harness the power of citizen scientists who are out on the coastlines and the water and have a really great interest in these species, we could actually find out a lot more about them and therefore we could protect them better.
Wind-driven bushfires have destroyed hundreds of structures in northern New Mexico and forced thousands of people to flee mountain villages as blazes burn unusually early in the year in the parched American Southwest. 2 fires merged northwest of Las Vegas and raced through 25 k's of forest, driven by 120 km/h winds, destroying more than 200 buildings.
Streaming live on iHeartRadio. This is News Talk ZB News.
It's 4 o'clock. I'm Bruce Russell. A 17-year-old has been charged with a number of driving offences. It follows an alleged hit-and-run incident in Taupo last evening. 4 people, including an unrestrained 4-year-old, were found inside a Nissan Bluebird, which had crashed into another vehicle. It happened at the intersection of Kaimanawa Street and Tahihu Street. The elderly driver of the other vehicle sustained moderate injuries. The teenager will appear in the Rotorua Youth Court this week on charges of failing to stop, reckless driving and possession of an offensive weapon. Police have released the name of a man killed on Don Street in Invercargill yesterday. He was 25-year-old Chad Parikura. A second victim, a 22-year-old Invercargill man, is still in the Southland Hospital's critical care unit in stable condition. Police have launched a homicide investigation and are appealing for witnesses who were in the street around 1:45 yesterday morning. A New Zealander locked down in Shanghai is desperate to get his disabled dog home. David Foote and his partner are planning to move here with their adopted dog Stephen, who needs to stay in Singapore for 6 months for biosecurity reasons before he can fly here. But the current COVID-19 lockdown in Shanghai, where many residents can leave only to get tested, has disrupted those plans. Mr. Foote says they're worried the lack of animal protection laws in China could see Stephen in danger if they test positive.
There are videos circulating of quarantine workers killing animals when their owners are taken to central quarantine.
They've started to Give a Little page to help raise funds to get Stephen to this country. The candidates in the French election will have to hope they've done enough to sell themselves to the country. Incumbent Emmanuel Macron is facing off against Marine Le Pen. Results are expected to come out overnight. Political analyst Alex Kouchner says while Macron is likely to win, Le Pen shouldn't be counted out just yet. He says 51% of those polled think she will change things for the best. Concerns a proposal to bolster the supply chain lacks a critical understanding of the system. The Transport Ministry has released a paper for public consultation warning freight and the supply chain face major issues. It puts forward solutions like switching to a low-emission system to combat climate change and improving resilience. But Auckland University supply chain expert Tava Olsen says it fails to recognise we don't have one chain, we have many.
The strategy Fonterra has for milk powder is extremely different to the strategy that Fisher & Paykel Healthcare have for their devices.
Our tech sector's diversity problem is moving in the right direction, but more work is needed. The most recent data shows that only 25% of digital and IT workers are women, and under 10% are Māori or Pacifica. NZ Tech Chief Executive Graham Muller says the industry body has developed programs to get minorities into the sector, but he says the problem goes deeper.
A low number of women, Māori and Pacifica, actually engage in the subjects at school, which means, right at the moment it's hard to change the mix in the industry if the kids are not even interested.
The Chicago artist Cynthia Plastercaster, who shot to fame by making models of rock stars' most private part, has died at the age of 74 after a long illness. Cynthia All-Britain started making such plaster casts in the late 60s and became well known in the world of rock and roll. Her subjects included Dead Kennedys frontman Jello Biafra, The Who drummer Keith Moon, Jimi Hendrix and many more.